What it shall be. We're back again. Today's video is called Spirit War Boot Camp number 86. And we're really going to do an appealing title here. Hopefully this will get a lot of views. We're going to go ahead and title this one Masonic Nephilim Hybrids. So this should be a super trendy topic because there's a bunch of Bible tards out there talking about this. But it's nothing like what they think it is. They've got it all ass backwards. In order to find out the truth of it, it's a long process, and it's only coming together for me after many decades of slogging through L.A. Waddell and Albert Mackey and what's his name, Albert Pike, and all these really obscure Masonic authors, and slogging through all the tomes of all these different religions that they read to write their writings. And it really, it's like one of those, almost like a Dan Brown movie where you have to know all these codes and ciphers. And at a point you start to realize that all the religions of the Near East are telling the exact same story, and they're just changing the names. And so in one book it'll be called the Pillars of Syriad, right? And then one's called Jacob's Ladder, and one is called the Great Pyramid of Jesus, right? That's what so they all have different names for the things, and it's all this cryptographic mix around. So let's just go ahead and get back to the title. So Masonic Nephilim Hybrids, what is that? So most people know about the Freemasons. It's one of the most popular conspiratard topics, which unfortunately, like I said, is super complicated. And any piece of it is so fucking bizarre that it can spawn off all these fantasies about what it all is. But unless you really are a scholar and do some basic study of the Greek language and Aramaic and Hebrew and all these different languages, like it's going to confuse the shit out of you because it's made that way on purpose. And even Albert Pike says that in Morals and Dogma. He says, the lower degrees are deliberately misled to think that they know the meaning of all this symbolism, but the real meaning is not revealed to them openly until they reach, these higher and higher levels of obscurity. And so they operate based on their own misconceptions. But the thing that often happens, and I've heard many stories of investigators who have this happen, is if you really are sincere in putting a lot of effort into it, things will be revealed to you. You'll be guided to certain information. You'll have these intuitive kind of breakthroughs. And that's what happened with me. I just off the cuff was making videos about this to try and correct what I thought were misconceptions and basically explain how the things that I'm studying are actually described by all these secret societies, but they have a much different spin on it. But anyway, the point is to say, so that's Masonic, is dealing with the Freemasonic thing, which again ties into really the Freemasonic thing, in my opinion, is really just the B'nai B'rith, which is a Israeli Zionist secret society. And a lot of people would really trip out once they realize and learn that the Nazis, the Freemasons, and the Jesuits are all pretty much the same fucking thing. And the Rosicrucians and all these different groups, it's all the same thing. And it's based on this, what I'm about to talk about, which is this concept of the Nephilim. And people have a completely ass backwards understanding of what this is. So Nephele in Greek means a cloud. This is where we get the word nebula in English, which also has the meaning of being a cloud. And so in all these myths, whether you're talking about Indra and his giant white elephant Aravata, where he carries around thunderbolts through the sky, or whether you talk about Zeus impregnating various females in the form of a cloud and producing hybrid offspring, right? So these so-called heroes and demigods like Perseus, who have superhuman strength and wit, and they can get involved in all this kind of bizarre stuff that most humans would never even come across because they're imbued with this plasma energy of these Nephilim, whatever you want to call them, And so this is a hybridization of program. And this is the true secret of Masonry. This is what John Dee was trying to figure out with his Enochian stuff. And what's Enoch? Enoch's the guy who somehow goes up into heaven and gets revealed the secret mechanical workings of what I'm calling the geocosm, right? Like our realm of earth. Like it's revealed to him by these, angels. And what are angels? They're fiery beings that live in the sky. Hello, plasma. Hello. And so, of course, in Arabic lore, you have the jinn, which is very similar. And again, it's outright explained that, King Solomon is the offspring of King David and the wife of Uriah the Hittite, who is one of these Nephilim, right? And one of David's so-called mighty men, the giants, right? Who have superhuman strength and stuff. And so where did all these people hang out? Well, they hang out on the ziggurat, right? They hang out on the Great Pyramid. They hang out at these electrostatic accumulators. Where does Moses go to get the Ten Commandments? He goes up on top of a mountain that's covered in clouds and lightning. Hello? How has nobody figured this out? Maybe it's deliberate. Maybe they're deliberately obfuscating this. Because a lot of times when I see these commentators and podcasters talking about all this Nephilim shit, it's obvious that they're either, let's just say Talmudic persuasion, or they're insiders in this group pretending to be these kind of slow-witted Christians, evangelicals or whatever. They're pretending, but they're really, they're pretending to denounce the very thing that they're advocating, with the purpose and with the objective and with the result of popularizing their doctrine and infiltrating the minds and infecting people's minds with the mind virus that they want to propagate, and making them more and more susceptible to the influence of not only these ideas, but let's just say certain psychological patterns that are very welcoming to these types of beings and their influences, okay? So yeah, I mean, I know people, you don't want to think about that. But to me, if anyone goes back and looks at the videos that I was making, 5 years ago or more, I've made probably over 1,000 videos. In the very beginning, I was talking about human bioelectricity. And for me, that's my gateway into this. I was trying to understand the human body and our physical health, and how there's an energetic, subtle component to our health, to our mental function, and how having a basic understanding of these things and undertaking different types of calisthenics, different types of dietary practices, different types of meditation, and what I'm calling micro calisthenics, right? Understanding the very subtle muscular movements within the body that can influence the cerebral spinal fluid, and these subtle micro currents of electricity that flow through our bodies. And this is the reality, and everything that we're taught, of course, like I've always been saying, it's all about delusional materialism. That's what our whole education system is based on, completely obscuring, obfuscating, and confusing the issue of these subtle energies, right? Whereas if you look at these occult groups, they're completely fucking obsessed with it, and they're spending billions and billions of dollars to build 40 Wall Street, so-called copper top, these giant skyscrapers that are in actuality geomantic sigils and electrostatic accumulators. And that's why, you have Donald Trump's uncle building giant proton accelerators and Van de Graaff generators and Tesla towers and this type of thing. It's exactly dealing with what I'm saying. And same thing with the pyramid, same thing with the ziggurat, same thing with all these, megalithic structures all around the world. They're exploiting and manipulating this exact topic. And if you look at the folklore and the mythology of all these groups, they're going to tell you what it's all about. The Nephilim and all this pre-flood stuff, the Atlanteans, the Nephilim, all this pre-flood stuff. And what does it say in the Bible? The Bible tells us God had to flood the entire earth because these Nephilim and these genetic hybridizations of all the animals and humans and even the plants, the genetics was getting all fucked up. So he had to reboot the entire system with the cataclysm. And this has happened multiple times. And that's why there's 2 creation accounts in the book of Genesis. It's like, hello, did I fucking stutter? The same events get repeated multiple times just within the first couple chapters of Genesis. So what is that telling you? The system gets rebooted periodically because of issues pertaining to this exact thing that I'm saying. And the Tower of Babel is an allegory for the Great Pyramid. It's really talking about the pyramid. What a tower to God, where they gain the powers of the gods, which is what? Static electricity. And they gain, from the point of view of these higher beings, they're gaining an undue influence over the realms that they want to consider their domain. And so they overload the system. And that's why you see to this day on tarot cards, you see the blasted tower with a lightning bolt striking the tower. They're telling you, like, this is the reality of so much in our world. It's all connected. And that's what I'm trying to tell in these videos. So the Nephilim, what we're being described, if you're a Greek scholar, you're saying, you read that word Nephilim and you're like, oh, clouds. And then you have tons of examples from all the Greek myths pertaining to these clouds. And this, like I said, it's in the Vedic mythology. It's all of these different mythologies all over the world telling the exact same thing about what's going on up there, right? These cloud beings. And where does God live in heaven, right? El Elyon, the Most High. What's the Most High? It's electrostatic region, the thermosphere and the ionosphere of the atmosphere. That's where these guys live. And that's why even the Bible, New Testament, is telling you Jesus is going to come back on a cloud. Okay, hello. And that's why, he has the so-called dove, the Holy Spirit, come and enter into his body at the point of baptism. Okay, so this is telling you about plasma entities, okay? And this is what the whole Masonic thing, and if anyone has the real fortitude to go back and read John Dee's writings, he's telling you the exact same thing about how these so-called Enochian angels come and squeeze the energy bodies of Dee and Kelly so that they can understand this language. So they're compressing them, they're giving them compressed charge so that they can communicate with these beings. And of course, this never ends well for any of these people. Anybody who engages with these beings without an incredible scientific knowledge and every kind of favorable circumstance, you're dealing with something you don't fucking understand, right? And now what we're seeing over and over again in human history, in my opinion, what we're seeing right now is no different. It's an attempt to create a retard counterfeit of this technology, right? That's what AI is. That's what 5G and 6G and all this bullshit is. And the nanotech and all the hydrogels and what's it called, graphene oxide and all this stuff. They're trying to forcibly basically intervene in human biology in such a way to allow these plasma entities to use human beings as wetware. And this is the exact same thing. Okay, MK Ultra, anyone who's ever studied some of the most elementary things of MK Ultra is what? Electroconvulsive therapy, shock therapy, using even cattle prods, using implants in people so that they can receive electrical stimulation by remote means, right? And then what else did they do? Lots of drugs, lots of mescaline. Of course, Aleister Crowley famously taking grip of mescaline, trying to communicate with entities. And what else does he do? He tries to climb up to the top of these Mexican volcanoes and does all this mountaineering in the Himalayas and stuff. Because that's where the plasma is at. That's where the charge accumulates. That's where you can communicate and interface with these entities, okay? So that's why all these different groups worldwide are, and that's why they build the ziggurat. That's why you see all the House of the Temple, 13 streets north of the White House in Washington, D.C. is a crappy reproduction of the mausoleum at Halicarnassus, which is what? It's a ziggurat-shaped pyramidal structure. That's going to be basically the incubator for Albert Pike's ghost to haunt the Temple of the 33rd. And again, so here's another parallel. If you look at the Vedic cosmology, and even in Buddhism, they have this thing they call the Temple of the 33, or the heaven of the 33. And while Buddha is waiting to be born as Buddha, he goes to the heaven of the 33. When he's going to teach the Dharma to his deceased mother, he goes to the heaven of the 33. Whereas Maitreya, so-called next Buddha, waiting to kick it until the time comes around, he's kicking it in the heaven of the 33, okay? They call it Ogmin in Tibetan, okay? And it's the exact same thing. And that's why to this day, you see the UN flag is a series of rings with 33 sections. And the center ring, the North Star, the North Pole, the Rupus Nigra, whatever you want to call it, this axis of all the worlds, the Mount Meru, right? It's the 33rd segment, okay? It's not a coincidence. That's why the same thing with all the masonry. It's not a coincidence whatsoever, okay? This is the reality-based macro structure in which we exist, okay? And plasma entities are real. Why does every culture in the world have stories about spirit possession and ghosts and deceased ancestors floating around in certain areas? And why does the Brocken have all these plasma phenomenon in Bavaria floating around on these quartz ley lines and stuff like that all over the world where you see a paranormal so-called activity? Why did they do the Trinity test site on the 33rd parallel? Why is the Roswell crash by the 33rd parallel? Blah, 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 on and on and on. But so what I'm trying to do is demystify that and say that it's all a science, and that they've created all these obscure jargon systems and all these bizarre metaphysical speculations in different languages about fallen angels and the spirits of the Goetia and all this crap, is trying to obscure for you the fact that there is a such thing as a discarnate plasma intelligence. And these beings don't die, okay? They're not mortal in the same way that we are. So they can accumulate information over tens of thousands of years or more. And this is exactly what they say in the Vedic cosmology. And they talk about how the devas and all these different deva lokas that they exist in are existing for tens of thousands of years, right? And that's why all the rishis and everybody tries to purify their body of all contaminants and toxins so that they can serve as a functional capacitance for this electrostatic energy of these plasma beings and be revealed high knowledge and extend their lifespan, improve their intelligence, improves their physical health and strength and so on, and obtain this high level of knowledge. And so the Spirit War series is just to kind of crack the door open and show you how everybody on the internet who's blabbing about all this bullshit with a very low degree of acumen is all talking about the same thing. And they're trying to steer it in their particular way and explain it away in such a way that serves their agenda and puts them at the peak power pyramid and the pinnacle where they can exploit you with their degree systems and so on. And they can put you into their BDSM cult and get the cable toe around your neck and have you strip down to your Masonic underwear to get into their BDSM boy love cult called the Knights de Molay, or whatever they want to call it today, the Knights Templars, the assassins, the hashishin, whatever they want to call it today, where they're going to drug you up, they're going to forcibly subject you to the influences of the worst, lowest grade of these plasma beings, so that you become possessed and you become a hackable wearable, so they can use you for their dangerous operations and, you know, what do they call it? Change agents and agent provocateurs who are controlled through remote means by this very plasma technology that we're trying to talk about. So the point of these videos is to A, raise awareness of all these issues, but to B, point out the fact that there's thousands and thousands of years of lore and knowledge all about this that you can use for your personal benefit, to liberate yourself, to grow giant crops, to live in a healthy way, to extend your lifespan, to improve your intelligence, and to create a freer, self-sufficient world that's not based on paying Rockefeller oil interest for your so-called medical interventions or for your energy, that it's all free, that it floats around, that it's part of this geocosmic system in which we exist, to tap a limitless source of energy that can extend your lifespan and even make you grow bigger like a giant titan and these men of renown that we're reading about in the Bible, instead of having it bogarted by these cuck lords in the Illuminati and the Masonic orders, who do tend to grow pretty tall, like John Kerry. And, you know, all the presidents tend to be very tall, and they tend to have blue or gray eyes over the lifespan of this country. And that's for a very specific reason, because they're breeding themselves to have a certain genetic affinity with these technologies and with these entities. And there's a flip side to all that. It doesn't have to be evil, right? You can use the same knowledge to create all these wonderful things, but that's what they don't want. And that's why they're keeping people in ignorance. And that's why they're creating elaborate mythologies of the Marvel universe and Doctor Strange and all this kind of nonsense, and the Dune series and all that. They're trying to control sci-fi and science fiction to give you a particular predictive interpretation of all these phenomena, that so that you're, that they can plug you into their system. And so in order to avoid that and to live a healthy life and to be a healthy human being with a healthy psychology, you need to understand the science of plasma. And so that's why we're here. And this has been Spirit War 7, or the Spirit War number 86. And we are going to take it next time finally into the OR theory, which is basically biological application of this to understanding the human cognition, and how the biological AI of the human brain is far superior to any of their bullshit slave tech that they're trying to promote. And so hopefully we'll see you there next time.